Good morning, class. Today we will discuss new chapter Tribals, Dikus, and the vision of a golden age. In this chapter, we will discuss meaning of Jhum cultivation or shifting cultivation. How did colonial rule affect tribal lives? Problem of British with shifting cultivation and what happened with shifting cultivators. Today, my first point is how did the tribal groups live? Children, please understand tribal groups live in forest. In this slide, we understand how they survive in forest. Some were Jhum cultivators. Some of them practice Jhum cultivation, that is shifting cultivation. Children, please understand Jhum cultivation, also be known as shifting cultivation. This was done on small patches of land, mostly in forest. The cultivators cut the tree tops to allow sunlight to reach the ground and burn the vegetation on the land to clear it for cultivation. They spread the ash from the firing, which contained potash, to fertilize the soil. They use the axe to cut trees and the hoe to scorch the soil in order to prepare it for cultivation. They broadcast the seeds, that is, scattered the seeds on the field instead of plugging the land and sowing the seeds. Once the crops was ready and harvested, they moved to another field. A field that had been cultivated once was left fallow for several years. Shifting cultivators were found in a hilly and forest tract of northeast and central India. Children, please understand most of the tribal groups in India found in northeast and the central India. The life of these tribal people depended on very free movement with forest and on being able to use the land and forest for growing their crops. That is the only way they could practice shifting cultivation. Hopefully, you understand how tribal groups done shifting cultivation in forest. Next point is problem of British with shifting cultivation. The British were uncomfortable with groups who moved about and did not have a fixed home. They wanted tribal groups to settle down and become peasants, cultivators. Settled peasants were easier to control and administer than people who were always on a move. The British also wanted a regular revenue source for a state, so they introduced land settlements. That is, they measured the land, defined the right of each individual to that land, and fixed the revenue demand for the state. Some peasants were declared landowners, other tenants. The tenants were to pay rent to the landowners, who in turn paid revenue to the state. Children, hopefully you understand when Britishers enter in India, they control our administrative policy. They make a law for forests. The time period they face problem regarding shifting cultivation. They wanted tribal groups to settle down and become peasant cultivators compare than shifting cultivation. It means Britishers want to ban shifting cultivation. Clear? Next point, children, see this slide regarding shifting cultivation. It is a picture of shifting cultivation. Now, third point is how did colonial rule affect tribal life? This point is very important when Britishers in India and control our forest, make a forest policy for tribal people. What was the effect of these policies on tribal life? Please understand. Before the arrival of the British, in many areas, the tribal chiefs were important people. They enjoyed a certain amount the economic power and had the right to administer and control their territories. In some places, they had their own policy and decided on a local rules of the land and forest management. Under British rule, children, please understand, chief were very powerful people in forest. But after British rule, the functions and the power of the tribal chief changed considerably. They were allowed to keep their land titles over a cluster of villages and rent out lands, but they lost much of their administrative power and were forced to follow law made by British officials in India. They also had to pay tribute to the British and discipline the tribal groups on behalf of British. Children, please understand, chiefs were lost their authority, their power limited by British officials. Clear? Next point, what happened to the shifting cultivators? The British effort to settle Jhum cultivation was not a very successful. Settled plug cultivation is not easy in area where water is scarce and the soil is dry. In fact, Jhum cultivation who took plug cultivation often suffered since their fields did not produce good yields. So the Jhum cultivators in northeast India instead to continue with their traditional practice, facing widespread protest. The British had to ultimately allow them the right to carry on shifting cultivation in some part of forest. Hopefully, you understand. Britishers want to ban shifting cultivation, but settled plug cultivation is not easy in area where water is scarce and the soil is dry. So, Jhum cultivation started protest for shifting cultivation against Britishers. That is why Britishers again allow to shifting cultivators carry on shifting cultivation. Hopefully you understand. uh, I'm continue this chapter in my next video.